Hello, I'm Dr. Susan Nash, and I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Tedesco, and he's here to talk to us about helium. But before we do that, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm a geologist and with some petroleum engineering experience. I live in Centennial, Colorado, and I've been in the oil and gas industry or energy industry since for about 46 years. Today, I'm going to present about helium. I started my career with getting a degree in geology from Northeastern University in Boston, then went to Southern Illinois University for a master's in coal, and then Colorado School of Mines later in my career. I've been operating my own wells, about 600 since 2000, maybe a little bit before that, yeah, probably 1990. And essentially, I've been out there producing oil and gas, also doing wind and solar, as well as exploring for helium, as well as looking at hydrogen and other opportunities. But today we're going to talk about helium, which presents a unique opportunity in comparison to natural gas prices, which are about $3 an MCF, which is the unit we use to measure quantity of gas for sale. Helium is going for anywhere from 375 to $500 an MCF. So it's very expensive. It does cost a lot to extract, but it can be very lucrative depending upon your end user and your market.
That's really exciting. And what's interesting is that you've basically done it all. So you're a really good um, judge of what really works.
Yeah, well, I did it my way. So what do we use helium for? Well, it's used in a lot of things other than party balloons, and cryogenics is the main use for it, or growing use, as well as it provides an inert atmosphere for growing silicon and germanium crystals. They become perfect. If you used oxygen or nitrogen, they would not be of the perfection we need to actually have AI chips. Managing manufacturing fiber optics, pressurizing and perjuring various vessels, cooling medium for nuclear reactors, critical for welding. The best atmosphere to weld under is helium. Nitrogen can work, and so can argon, but
It's
they
even better than argon because you hear about argon and welding
yeah.
all the time.
Argon and nitrogen are used because they're less expensive than helium, but
Oh,
typically for the type of welds you don't want to fail, like on a naval ship or the space shuttle or those sort of things, you use helium.
mm.
Leak detections, synthetic breathing mixtures, and obviously lifting blimps. And then in fusion, if we get to fusion, then we need boatloads of helium. We need to probably 10, 20, maybe 100 times the helium is going to be needed for the reactors that are going to be used for doing fusion, because the helium provides a stable atmosphere that does not react with anything. That's the real advantage of helium for these various applications, is because it doesn't react.
Mm.
What happens with no helium? Then no MRIs. Then how do we happen to manufacture chips? What you'll see is the computer system, the bottom left, which is from the 50s, I believe. We'd have to go back to those because could not make our chips as they are presently without helium. So what is helium? Well, simple element with two protons and one to two neutrons. It is completely inert. It does combine with things, but it's under significant pressures and temperatures that are generally in the sun. And helium is the second most common element in the universe, we believe, after hydrogen. It's also the second smallest element after hydrogen. It is very rare on Earth, though, and a lot of the helium we find is either was captured during the formation of the Earth 4 or 5 billion years ago, or from decay of uranium, lithium, and thorium. And we also think it's decaying from some other elements as well, but we don't have the evidence yet. But it's very chemically inert and non-reactive. Hydrogen, on the other hand, is very reactive, which makes it harder to find in quantities sufficient to be economic to sell.
It's kind of interesting. It makes you wonder if some of the planets that have lot and moons that have lots of volcanoes might have a helium atmosphere.
They might, who knows? With the way the space, with all these telescopes out there, they keep telling us there's planets that are Earth-like and that sort of thing. I don't know how they determine that, but they might find a helium planet.
I mean, they found methane, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud.
Right. So the production in reserves, helium was found in 1920 by the British, and it was a product of World War One in terms of the British found that with about 10% helium in the gas mixture with hydrogen for Zeppelins and dirigibles, they did not blow up when they were hit by machine gun fire or rockets or that sort of thing. The British had a source of helium, the Germans did not. And because of that, the Germans were obviously handicapped. But subsequently, after the war, the first plant in the world was put in Ontario by the British. But when it got operating, the amount of helium that they could process was limited because a lot of the gas wells that they were going to use were depleted and plugged and abandoned. So they moved the plant to Saskatchewan, Alberta, where they started producing helium. And about in the 20s in the US is when helium exploration really took off. Dexter, Kansas is where it started. Subsequently, it expanded all over Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and slowly expanded into other areas like Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, New Mexico. Present day, what we're seeing is Canada is now producing 5.5% of the world's production. We produce 40 to 50%, sometimes 60%. And then there's three or four other areas in the world that produce the remaining amount of helium. And there is a lot of small fields, for example, in Poland and elsewhere, but for the most part, Europe, China, for example, has no helium real resources, so it gives us an advantage over them. And U.S. as well as the other three areas that are providing helium supply Asia for their making their computer chips, as well as a lot of other places around the world. This just gives you an idea of the production that we saw through time, the center graph. But the helium reserves in the US are still robust. The other main source of heliums are Russia, Qatar, and Algiers. Russia right now is basically banned from selling helium, so they're selling their helium to India and China. And Iran, which owns a field that I'll show later, is now putting in a helium processing plant. And I believe the Israelis targeted that plant when they made their attacks on Tehran in order to stop them from using the helium in the nuclear industry. This is a map of helium in the US and Canada. This was 2020. Um, the gray areas are the basins that produce helium or hold helium. And then the turquoise colors are very low helium numbers. So you can see we have a lot of data across the country. A lot of it's old data. But in the West, in Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and then up into Alberta, Saskatchewan, Wyoming, those data are recent. The red numbers are obviously very high helium amounts. Canada doesn't have high helium, but they have high volume of gas, which they can extract the helium from. Whereas down in the States, we have wells that only make 25, 30 MCF a day, but have 8% helium, and that can be an economic depending on price. So the areas to find helium right now are very focused. I'm starting to focus in the eastern part of the US because that's closer to where a lot of end users are. And
Mhm.
finding helium there would be advantageous for a producer being close to someone who will take it.
That's
This,
really, really interesting. Like it makes me think of other places that really haven't been explored yet, but that may have potential.
right, right. So this is just a diagram of how helium migrates from the surface. Most of our helium, we believe, comes from the mantle and the lower crust. Like I said, some of it was trapped there. Some of it's being um, expelled from uranium and thorium and lithium minerals. It takes about 1.3 billion years for a helium element to form from uranium. And we have a lot of helium that we're finding in more and more areas that was overlooked. So, we're not sure exactly where the helium is coming from and how much is really down there, way down deep. Unlike oil and gas, which we can target the source rocks because we're drilling through them to find oil and gas or above them. So it's a very different set of problems and exploration uh, strategies that you have to go through. Now, this
I
is
mean, it's like, is there any helium that's not associated with natural gas?
Yes, well, there's helium. There is helium associated with carbon dioxide
Okay.
accumulations as well as nitrogen. Southeast Colorado, Southwest Utah has big CO2 accumulations that have helium. The problem
Mhm.
is, what do you do with that carbon dioxide? And some cases they use it for EOR for the Texas fields. That's where the Colorado CO2 is going. And same with at the this field, the big Piney LaBarge field in
Mhm.
Wyoming. All the CO2 is used for secondary recovery or tertiary recovery in the eastern part of the state in Wyoming in oil fields. But,
Nice.
the other problem is if you find a carbon dioxide reservoir that has good helium, if you're not close to a pipeline or have no way to get rid of the carbon dioxide, it creates additional issues and you might not be able to produce. But this is the Big Piney LaBarge field, and you can see this is where it's producing from. I'm sorry, this is where it's from producing from, and more are being added down here. There's a company out of Colorado that has a JAPEX out of Japan as a partner, and so it's low percentages of helium in the CO2, but because of the high volumes they move, it's very economic. And you can see the complex geology. Now, Qatar is another place. This is the largest field in the world, PARS. It's broken up into north and south. South has made Qatar a very wealthy country. 20, 30 years ago, they found this field. Iran has the north side of it. It's got helium in it, but once again, it's high volumes of gas, so it's economies of scale. And Iran is now trying to get the helium out in order to use for their nuclear facility, but it's in a very fun place in the world.
Well, how do you know that? It could be for party balloons.
To celebrate all their losses during the war recently, yes.
That's sad.
I don't think they party. Anyway, this is the field in Algeria that's providing a lot of helium. Um, the Algerians have been trying to add other fields, but sometimes they find that they're to make a quick buck, they like to sell their gas to Europe before taking the helium out. But regardless, they produce about 20% of the world's helium. Oops.
Interesting.
And this is the Hugoton, Texas Panhandle. This is the first big field in the world. It was
That's the one
found,
I'm familiar with, just north
right,
of Amarillo.
right. It was found in the 20s and 30s. It kicked off a lot of exploration. We have other fields, smaller fields in other areas that were found about the same time. But this field continues to produce helium. It's slowly it's near the end of its life. Of course, that could be relative. It might be 50 years to the end of its life, or it might be 10 years. In many ways, we don't
Hmm.
know. But essentially, this has been one of the biggest, if not the biggest, producer of helium to date, and it's provide a lot of the helium around the world.
Well, and I would wonder too that, I mean, we usually don't do much in terms of secondary recovery for natural gas in the Texas Panhandle, like no water floods.
Right.
However, I would think that there might be some potential for refracking for the helium.
Maybe.
Just
They
thinking out loud, or increased density or something.
well, the problem with fields like the Texas Panhandle, Hugoton, is they're under pressured. And so the volumes, and if you frack, you'll probably break out through the cap rock.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why the helium's retained there is because the rocks are in higher pressure over them than the reservoir
Hmm.
pressure. But when you have overpressured area like the Big Piney LaBarge, the helium stays in the reservoir because the rocks above are also overpressured, and
Okay.
they can't migrate out. Now
Yeah.
this is Harley Dome. This is an area I just made a well that it looks like it's a helium discovery just to about 10 miles to the west of this field. Its gas is all nitrogen, and that's what our discovery looks like. But the helium is a high percentage, and in certain market conditions, this field has made very, very good amounts of money for people. Now, this field was found probably 100 years, probably 80 years ago, but it's only been produced off and on. It's not a very big field, and it's like one I'll show shortly, the Model Dome, that's had the same issue. It's been exploited about 3 or 4 times over 100 years or 80 years. So some of these fields are very small, but small is beautiful because it can make money. Um,
What's the porosity and permeability of the entrada?
Oh, it's pretty good. It's probably 15 to 22% porosity, 1 Darcy permeability.
Oh, wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really good.
Yeah. Now, this is the riser field in Kansas. This is another one of these small fields. And you can see the map of Kansas down below. The red area is the Hugoton, but there's not a lot of fields in the central part of Kansas that have been very economic. Were found early on in the 30s and 40s. They've been produced pretty much to zero, but occasionally we still find little 1 or 2 well fields in the area. But this is really good geology, nice structures, and then they also typically come with natural gas as well as you might have some oil zones. And helium is rarely ever, there's a couple fields with oil. It's generally if the oil is present, there's no helium present, even if
Mhm.
there's natural gas.
Hmm.
Now, a new area that's taken off is the Model Dome, and this is in south central Colorado, just east of Trinidad on the Episcopal Uplift. And I put this in here because I love their diagrams. But
Yeah.
the gas is very shallow, and the source is because the uplift is there. It's throwing off a lot of helium into very young rocks. Generally, helium is found in Paleozoic rocks, and typically in the Mississippian, Devonian, and Cambrian. But it just shows you how complex some of these helium deposits can be. The main area that's accumulating helium is this area here in the Lions. I believe it's a Permian or Jurassic sand. Essentially, it just big dune facies that accumulate helium, high porosity permeability. They also make fresh water, so the landowners like it because they can feed their cattle free water rather than pipe it
Oh,
in.
yeah.
Yeah. Just another cross section. Once again, this is showing uh, the entrada. Why that is okay. Anyway, same sort of thing. And this is just another picture of the blown up to show the detail of the concepts. A lot of this is obviously artistic license, but it still demonstrates that the helium's coming from the basement and accumulating in shallow units. Now we
But
also
then, so I see this is Pennsylvania, but when you're talking about the dune facies, was that Permian?
it can be Permian or it can be Jurassic.
Yeah, I was thinking
Just
either
Jurassic,
Jurassic. Yeah,
intratus
like
Jurassic,
Morrison.
and then
Okay.
so it just a matter. It's just a matter of the helium. If it's going to be trapped, is typically trapped in Paleozoic rocks. The past two
Mhm.
examples there I showed. Well, the Cisco Harley Dome area and Model Dome area. There's no Paleozoic, so it's accumulating in shallow Mesozoic rocks.
Oh,
And
is that because of a disconformity?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
either nothing was deposited or was eroded off prior
Yeah.
prior to the Mesozoic being deposited. But in other areas we're looking at is in Tanzania. So far, there's a lot of helium here, but there doesn't seem to be a trap. This area is part of the Africa Rift System, and so there's a lot of things that are moving. They have found oil and gas major reservoirs along the East Africa Rift System further to the north of here. This is in southern Tanzania. The problem is that when you have active volcanoes, and earthquakes, they tend to disrupt traps and they get breached very easily. So far, there's been one well that's been drilled, but they'd have to move 20,000 barrels a day of water to get the helium out. And right now, that's not very economic. There's other people exploring in here, but it's a very difficult area, and also it's in a country that's far away from vendors and facilities. Difficulty entering and exiting the country takes time, so it's a big commitment to be here. But it's great seismic sections. In geology, it's just fun to look at that type of stuff and wonder what's going on.
That's amazing.
Yeah. In summary, helium is a critical element needed for modern society. It's if it hasn't been trapped during the formation of the Earth, it's from decay from uranium, thorium, and lithium minerals. The majority of the helium is in U.S., Qatar, Algeria, Russia, and right now the helium from Russia seems to be only going to China because it's part of the sanctions. They can't sell to the rest of the world. The central part of the U.S. and Southern Rockies, and then Alberta and Saskatchewan is where most of the helium activity is found right now. And finding these reserves is very difficult. It's not very easy. There's a lot of natural gas facil accumulations that have no helium in them. So it's probably about 17% of natural gas accumulations will have helium in them. Recovering the helium from the gas stream is expensive. The facilities take a year or more to put into place, but once you got them in place, they're very economic if the price is good. Purchasers of helium limited to about six companies, so it's a very opaque industry in terms of what goes on, and a lot of people get frustrated with that. But you can sell to end users directly. Helium is easily transported by truck. There's no helium pipelines anywhere in the US and Canada or anywhere else. It's simply just transported in trucks. And they transport about 400 MCF of helium. And as you can imagine, the truck actually weighs heavier than the helium it's storing. However, helium provides a unique financially opportunity for many small companies as well as mid-sized companies if they can focus on it. And especially if they find it in their natural gas stream. Thanks so much.
Well, this is really interesting. So, okay, so how would a little guy get started?
Uh, Sort of, well, a little company, they really, and there's a lot of them that do. Many of them go public, but that's going public is actually difficult because you spend a third of your money on public um, parts of the company, parts of the process, maintaining your stock price and providing information to investors and
Mhm.
filing financials. But small companies like myself, I just went and found partners. I found an area that I knew I actually owned the area, the wells in the area, and we
Okay.
were next to Harley Dome, and so we knew and I had helium in my gas stream. It just wasn't the
Okay.
amounts that I needed, but the deeper zone, which was the Entrada, I was producing out of the Dakota Sand, which is Cretaceous in age. Um, a lot of wells hadn't gone to. As a matter of fact, the percentage was probably 5% of all the wells drilled in the area. So we just shot some seismic, found a nice structure, did some surface geochemistry that showed that the structure had helium leakage as well as um, actually nitrogen leakage and some other and some methane leakage. And then you go ahead and drill. Now the next step is we're going to start flow testing and then look at uh, financing the facility, which can cost 2.5 to 4 or 5 million.
What's
Just for
nice about that though is that since you already had wells, you've got the infrastructure, gas gathering systems, all that in place. So you can, I guess, maybe double dip, use them multi-purpose.
right. And then I forgot to mention I've written the only book on helium and geology with Elsevier in
That's great.
2022. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great book.
thank
So,
you.
so I think, yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, that's pretty exciting, especially when you take the kind of really clear, measured approach that you've taken, and
Right,
and you're really looking at the facts. You're not trying to arm wave and say, "Hey, there's this huge thing." Like, okay, maybe there is something huge in Tanzania, but what good does it do anybody here?
right. Well, there's a lot of companies that don't like exploring for the U.S.
Right.
For a variety of reasons. But at the same point, Tanzania has a potential to have a lot of helium. The problem is that the drilling actually there started there with the British in the 1950s, and they couldn't find any accumulations, but they had very large percentage of helium migrating up through hot springs, 8%,
Hmm.
10%, 12%. And that's been the problem is they've not found where the helium can accumulate in such volcanically active areas, even though there's a lot of helium present.
That makes sense. And the other thing too, I mean, I didn't mean to seem so cavalier on what good does it do is because obviously people can work for the common good of the globe
Yeah,
and obviously, but I would think that when it's remote, one is going to have to be really creative in getting the pilots going, getting proof of concept so that it can at least grow, um, rather than having to say it's all or nothing, massive or nothing.
right. Well, a small deposit of a 300 or 400,000 MCF of helium can make a company a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you had a natural gas field, you need 3 or 4 BCF to justify developing it and put in pipelines. So it's a very different thing in terms of volume. I mean, Harley Dome has only produced 51 million cubic feet of helium, but it's made quite a bit of money, probably $100 million or something from that helium.
Well, also what I like about what you're talking about is that while you're producing the helium, you're going to have a lot um, of natural gas. Well, okay, maybe there's no market for the natural gas, or the pipeline is under pressure or it's low pressure, and you're not able to get it without a lot of gas compressors into the cross-country line. However, in today's environment, you can do something like um, put a microgrid out there and
Sure.
work with somebody who needs it for whatever they're using it for in terms of um, their server farm.
Right. Well, also, if you have natural gas, that will run your equipment. And
That's
then,
true.
right. And then actually, if you put the natural gas back down in the ground, you get tax credits.
Oh, nice, nice. And in theory, maybe it's kind of like it's a way to do it, natural gas EOR.
Right. Well, also remember that in Hugoton, they went into they was taking natural gas and turning it into white oil. I forget what it was called. They did,
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was,
yeah,
no, no, it wasn't kerosene, but it was like a very light.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a
Low
way for them
gravity.
to make more money at one time from the natural
Hmm.
gas. So there's it's probably still able to do that as well. So there's a lot of things you can do now with natural gas. You can run Bitcoin or AI centers.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Server farms.
Right.
Yeah, super interesting. Well, thank you, Steve. This is absolutely fascinating. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, your contact information is in the first slide.
Right.
And I think the timing is perfect.
Yes, I do too. Well,
Great.
thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Okay.